Alright folks, this is it. We just need to enter the portal and see how this thing concludes.
Alright.
This can't be. What have they done? How could they? This is it. This is the end. I have to do it.
What you may be saying, Polka?
No, Polka. It is not over quite yet. We must not give up.
What are you doing?
We're just gonna straight Leroy Jenkins through this.
After all, this is my dream.
Let's just say that Frederick has kind of taken his decision after all of this.
This
And we'll
came
see.
a bit out of nowhere. I mean, don't get me wrong.
Don't worry, Jova. There you go. Final chapter, Heaven's Mirror.
I'll just sum
This
up.
alone should tell you a couple of things on how this is gonna go. But however, here's the thing. That what Legato
Where
did
are
with his final attack may have been even
It's the
worse
field of
than we'd
flowers next to
imagined.
Sonata.
Because this
How
is
can that
what the
be?
world now
This place
is. His attack
supposed
pierced
to
through
be
the
a flower
dimension
field?
and turned, in this case, we're in Tenuto, into a barren wasteland. And if you pay
Yes, it
attention,
is.
this is where
This is
where
the
the
place
game
where it all
started.
began. Where I met you, Polka. The place where this whole dream first
So
started.
we're concluding kinda in a book way, but not
Which is why
completely.
it's such a fitting place for the dream to come to an end.
Because he's got to die.
The time has finally come for me to confront my own heart. I must make my choice now. Whatever happens, I'll face the challenge before me. Don't you understand? You're nothing more than imaginary characters I've created in my mind.
Yes, but okay.
Okay.
Frederick,
Gee,
what
when
are
you
you
say it like that,
saying?
it just sounds
What's
completely
wrong with
stupid.
you?
He's kind of been hinting at that already, Pete.
Well, that's the
Forgive
thing.
me. I am
By
truly
now,
sorry,
Frederick
Beast.
has just taken his decision, and
Seems
since
I'll
he
be
wants to
unable
be
to offer my
committed
help
to
to you
it,
any longer.
he's going the extra mile.
It feels weird because, I mean, we didn't see a moment where he all of a sudden has this realization. It's just immediately,
When I
oh, I have this
defeated him in this
realization.
Well,
An
those
undeniable
dialogues
truth
that
will
happen
be
in the Final
revealed.
Dungeon, especially
Fleeting
what
dream will
Waltz
slowly
tells
fill
him,
with color
in
and
this
light.
case, near the end, serves to you to understand this
Only when
transition.
this ordeal
I
has
get that. It's just, I
finally
feel
come
we
to
could
an
have
end,
used just a little
my
bit
soul
more of
will
a
last
scene
and
showing he
permitted
has
to
the
leave that
realization
physical
until
body.
it comes to, oh, now we gotta fight him.
Well, it's not a realization, Jova. It's
So
more
then,
like him taking a
is this the
decision
path you've
from
chosen
something that he
for
was
yourself?
torn since the very beginning.
I
It is.
guess,
This is
though I'm
my
wondering
dream,
where the logic of us
and
beating
I
him
must
is
be the
going
one to
to
set things
do
right.
anything.
Well, that's the thing. He'd rather.
This
He
world
thinks
we're
that if he dies in this dream, he
must be
will
freed
still
from
die
the
in
tangle
real
of
life
twisted
anyway.
destinies.
So he might as well, go out and stop the illusion for him.
Now,
So basically, this
tests
is a
begin.
representation of what he's like when
we'll
he's
see
dying.
whether I,
Basically.
Kinda. But
Whether
however,
my
if
spirit
he,
can
he
become
may,
a
he
lance,
basically wants this
able
to
to
prove a
pierce through
point
all
in a
of
sense.
you in battle.
If this is really not just a dream, something will happen either
We'll
after
see
his
if I'm
defeat
truly
or he
such a weak
wins.
human being.
And yes, super twist, Chopin is the final boss.
Dun
Don't you all
dun dun! So let me guess.
Complete
This,
with an amazing remix of the Revolutionary Etude, which is super fitting for his boss fight. Not only that, he rocks not just his regular attacks from when he's a party member, but also but also a couple of new ones that he used exclusively for this fight, like that one, Applaudisme and Sonic. Here I'm just losing the liberty in the fight to show you what happens after he defeats you. This extra ending got added in the PS3 version. If he beats you in the Xbox 360 version, it's just a standard game over. Here they wanted to go the extra mile and say, yeah, let's see what happens if he actually proves his point. And it gives you also an excuse to showcase a bit of other characters that haven't used that much in the game, i.e. Crescendo and Serenade.
so I'm guessing that's why you picked Polka, Crescendo, and Serenade for this fight.
Yeah, again, to show a bit more for an occasion that I could. It's not like a thing intentionally say, oh, I want them to, to be shown that they're dying and everything. No, it's just a case of, showing them a bit more as the characters that I play, kind of similar to how I did in Final Fantasy VII.
Fair enough. Now, so, okay, I'll say this right now.
I'll
This
tell you.
having an actual remix of Frederick's, you know, the actual Frederick Chopin's music in-game, this is what the game needed more of, especially considering as how that's the theme. I mean, seriously, this actually feels like it fits perfectly with the theme and all that.
There you go, right?
Also, let me guess, he's incredibly super buff now because he's the bad guy.
Yes.
Stop my relentless advance.
So what happens? He actually wakes up.
What? So basically, the bad ending is an alternate future where Frederick Chopin lives.
Oh, Frederick, you've come back to us.
Huh.
So basically, killing fragments of your own mind heals your You know what?
Wait,
Remember
let me
what the
guess.
doctor said at the beginning, this would have been crucial for his recovery.
And he dies, doesn't he?
No. Well,
Oh,
it's
he
left
lives.
ambiguous. The dream vanished like smoke. I was left cold and alone. Is it ever possible to change fate?
Huh. This is actually interesting. So essentially, the bad ending is a good ending for Frederick Chopin where he fights off the disease and wins.
But everybody else dies. However, now the reverse.
Sadly. Let me say this, Tales of Xillia 2 tried to do this kind of ending as well, but I will say that game pulls it out so much badly and in a much meaner taste that God...
Yeah, Tales of
I'll say
Xillia
that
2
for that
tends
game.
to get a lot of mixed reception from what I hear.
No, not that. Well, it needs a bit of context, Jova. The context of the fact that the first Xillia, like I stated, for example, in my near final thoughts, it's what I consider my favorite PS3 game of all the ones that I played on that console. Keep in mind that this point is still an exclusive, but who knows, maybe a PC port in the future anyway. So I'm considering for the moment. The problem is that a lot of the fandoms, because of their struggle with Hideo Baba's ideologies and everything, did not like the first Xillia. As such, the team tried to make a sequel, Xillia 2, in which, in response to these fans, basically go the Blues Brothers 2000 effect of having the characters being sad, depressed, and having a lot of bad things happening to them. Now, it wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't for the fact that the game becomes also very preachy as a result of that. And one of the things that they try to do is having an ending where one of the main characters, the new main character, tries to kill the cast of the first game in a very gruesome and mean-spirited way, and you get a special ending because of that. It's quite jarring.
I'm not gonna judge fully until I see that game for commentary, but I just have this.
We'll see better in the actual game.
I just have this to ask though: why not just make a new Tales of game? Because that sounds like what they actually wanted to do.
Which is, well, that's the thing, Jova. The next game that they did after that was Tales of Zestiria, which was even worse.
Wow.
Since it's an ending, I'd probably need the full context to actually, you know, comment on that.
I'll still take Xillia 2 over Zestiria, because Zestiria is just fucking better.
Which is weird because...
True, but at least it's his own game. I mean, it's not... There's not
I know,
a foundation that it does.
I will
That's
say,
what
I will say this right now. Even I heard about Tales of Zestiria 2 because there's a lot of fallout. Because apparently the Tales of team was famous for managing to make such good
Anyway,
games.
hold on. Now,
Okay.
alright. Now, here's what happens.
Yes.
First of all, Chopin dies
best.
here.
So
sadly.
we killed him.
That's a very inappropriate sound effect.
Yeah.
However, well, this is supposed to be his dream, right? So why things are continuing?
Maybe it's truly the afterlife, or maybe they're just gonna go Chronicles of Narnia Book 7 on us.
No, Jova, that will be even more distasteful.
Don't you see, Tio? They're all departed spirits from an atomic bomb!
Yes, by the way, be sure to praise Aslan as your Lord and Savior.
So, is something supposed to happen now?
Thank you, Frederick.
What?
But
Basically, Frederick taking this stance also was supposed to stop Polka from doing what basically the entire game prophesized about her.
So essentially, that would mean he died for nothing by our hands, and Polka's still
sorry.
gonna do it anyway.
We'll see, Jova. Keep in mind, this ending is still very long.
True. I'll just admit, though, that's kind of a depressing note to open up on. Then again, a lot of final acts do open up on a
Allegretto,
visually depressing
please
note,
forgive
so
me for
I'll
not
wait to
telling
see
you
this to
about
the end.
this. If I had told you what I was going to do, there's no way that you would have taken me all the way here.
How is
And
he
we're
supposed
back where
to
it
know?
Started, maybe. Or maybe not.
You know, to his credit, Polka, I don't think there's
just
any way
that
he could have known
I
we'd have ended up here, given everything we
I remembered a while
did.
ago what the path is that I have to take.
Maybe, Jova, but again,
Polka,
maybe
what are
there's
you
something
doing?
more that we haven't
First Frederick
calculated.
and now you? What in the world is going on? Don't you see? Frederick just gave all of us a gift. The most precious gift there is.
The gift of life?
What the heck are
Well,
you saying?
maybe
Can
freedom
somebody
of
please
choice.
explain to me what's going on?
Polka,
I think we all need an
what
explanation.
exactly is it that you're planning on doing?
What do you think she's planning on doing, standing on the edge like that,
It's
Viola?
something that
I'm
I've
surprised they
been
haven't put
thinking
2 to
about
2
Like the
together
prophets
already.
once said.
And now I finally understand it. I know what she meant.
Normally I call you crazy, but considering how broken the world has gotten, maybe this is just ground zero. Also, visual image or she's tripping.
Yeah, visual image. Remember what her mother said? Her Astra is glowing so much that's the only thing that can heal the world.
Yes,
Of
it is my
course.
fate to go into the sea.
So it's the
only
plot
way.
of Song of
only
the
way
Sea?
tremendous waves that flood
No,
people
like
this
I
world
see a
can
distinct
finally
lack
be
of
made
Irish
calm.
elements here, Jova.
Wait a minute. What does
Also,
that
Song
mean?
of the Sea was far more engaging than this.
Most
Well, at
people
least it
live
was
their
more
lives turning their
comprehensible.
backs on things too difficult to
I don't,
face.
I don't think it's a problem of comprehension there. It's just the fact that I
Ignoring what hurts
don't
you
care about any
eventually
of this because they
becomes a
didn't do a
habit,
good job
the natural
developing
thing
these
to do.
characters and making me
To
care about them.
Pedro's credit,
only
again, a
allow
lot of this
ourselves
stuff
to see
feels
what
a
we want
bit
to see, we
out of
just end up
nowhere. Like, you
fooling
know, again,
ourselves
I
more
joke
and
about
more.
Kingdom Hearts, but at least with Kingdom
But
Hearts,
eventually,
we
we've
do
had our
feel the
vision so
progression
completely
here and
that
there,
we
even
become
when
blind to
we
the
get to the
small
deepest,
truths that are all
darkest
around
levels.
us.
Whereas here, we went into the
scene where the
afterlife to
twinkling of
chase
the stars is
after
blotted out by the glare
Forte,
of bright
and
city
somehow
lights.
the portal led out
The
to
truth
here
was
where the world
always
is all
there in my
broken.
memories.
It's kind of like an inverse of the first Kingdom Hearts where we end up going back to Destiny Islands
Mom,
inside End of the World.
everything.
Only again, we were
But I'm
kind of
ready
built
now.
up to that from the
And I
get-go.
know
Like,
what
we
it
get
is
it.
that I must
These are
do.
worlds that have been lost to the Heartless, or pieces of them, portals to
I'll
worlds.
add also a bit more to this, what you just said, Jova, during the final thoughts, but for now, just endure because, well, we know what's happening.
Polka, don't!
So, did anyone notice
Sorry,
Polka talking?
Beat, no
Oh
King's,
no,
Beat.
Polka, no,
I
stop,
want
come
you to
back.
know.
no
Your
King's
photographs
Quest
are so
5
wonderful.
reference.
Your
there,
photographs,
Full of
which...
memories
Wait,
that
were
I
his
don't
photographs
ever
more
wanna let
explored
go
in the
of.
side quests?
Yeah!
No,
Get
actually,
me,
no,
I
not
promise I'll
necessarily
take
side quest, it
even
was just
more.
a game mechanic. But remember, the fact that Beat is
If I
obsessed
had
with
any
the
choice in the
photograph
matter,
is a
I'd
thing that
never
was
want to give up these
established
memories
very
of
since the
this
beginning of
journey.
the game.
And
That's
the
what I
time
mean, though.
we
As a
spent
game
together.
mechanic, we didn't really
Yeah.
look into that during this
I know
playthrough,
this
so
is
it
hard
feels
for
a
you
bit
Because I
weird.
didn't. Well,
someday-
that's the thing. The last time Beat
someday
mentions
we'll all
about
meet again.
pictures was
I'm
with the glowing
absolutely
agogos. So basically around the third time with Beat Fugue.
I mean, it's not the worst thing, but it kind of feels a bit like cheating. Like, okay, maybe if she mentioned
Also,
it...
she's
Time
still
has come for everything to be
T-posing,
said.
kinda.
God, that's awkward.
Yeah.
Was
I
this
guess the whole
fated to
word
be?
about stuff like pictures
Was
is
this
like, well,
always my life's
hey,
purpose?
Devs, maybe we could have had more scenes
No.
of the characters actually
It's a
showing off their
decision I'm
stuff,
making of my
interacting
own
more.
free will.
Like, I have to,
This is
I
something
reflect on
that
it a bit
has
more
to
when
be
we're
done.
at the
I
end
mean,
here. And it,
Pedro, what do you think is worse, that pose or the
Polka, what are you
clasping your
doing?
hand that Princess Elise does?
oh my god, even Allegretto's asking,
Place
Polka,
where
what
I
are you
can make
doing?
a
And
real
I repeat,
difference.
guys, what do
Now
you
that the
think
world
she's
is
about to
out
do?
of
Someone just tackle her and get her
It's a
away
place
from
that I
that.
have to
Well, the
learn.
thing is, too, the
Yeah,
Princess
Beat,
Elise...
like,
Master
grab
that
her,
lies
maybe?
sleeping within my
Well,
heart.
that's the thing, too. The Princess Elise thing is just a thing Japanese
Don't do
people
it.
do, from
We'll
what I
find
can
some
tell.
other way to save
Whereas
the world.
this is just the
You don't have to
developers
carry all the burden by
being
yourself.
either lazy or just not caring about the movements feeling natural.
Possibly a combination of the two.
Also, she only has
Yeah,
to...
the basic, in case you haven't read the label, she basically said that on you.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but but isn't the whole hand gesture that at least does is like something that apparently is like a Japanese
I
thing?
think so, not sure.
I'm not sure.
I think what Elise is doing is just praying to some higher power or something that
Which
something
it
will
should be
better.
Solaris according to the lore of Soliana,
I
so
must do this.
yeah.
So I'm
And
just
there you go, like I said, this is where they started the game.
My life is nothing
Maybe.
compared to his.
Okay,
Oh.
now she's
Doing this is
T-posing.
easy.
okay.
If it's for him.
Yeah, now that's an actual Tifa.
Now I'm just
Established
gonna
it, Tommy.
go into how weird it is that she only has something to say to Beat about his photographs. Like she doesn't have anything to say to the other.
Polka. Ding.
Oh, Sam.
Bless you, Sam, you're trying your hardest, and I
You know,
admire
you
for
all
that.
could have done something. She was there monologuing long enough, you know.
Why
Just
couldn't I do anything?
There you
whatever.
go, Shira. The game is
Glad I
literally
don't
telling
change
that.
things.
Be sad.
it's a bit too late for that.
Dying was the only thing Polka could do. There wasn't any way we could save her.
The miracle never happened.
Literally.
Why did Polka, of all people, have to suffer
Okay,
like
I'm
that?
just gonna go back to Polka's
What the hell is
monologue.
wrong with
So,
this
Polka,
world?
the only thing you have to say about the people you're
Damn
about to
it!
leave is talk about.
Sorry.
Beat, what are you doing?
Again,
Just
The
nodding
Nara.
his head like.
hold on, let me. Again,
You-
this is supposed to be
You
like a
come
big
barging into a
emotional,
world out of
tragic
nowhere,
ending,
then just
and
leave when you get tired
Polka
of
doesn't
it.
even seem to care all that much that
Yeah.
she's leaving her fans behind.
supposed
This
to
is
be
my
your
big
dream,
problem.
right?
I'll
Well,
take
then why couldn't you do anything?
any plot twist, any crazy plot twist or out there thing over something like this. Like, I want the characters to actually give a damn about
That's
what's
not
going
it.
on.
Yeah.
Like, if you
isn't
don't
a
have
dream at
that,
all.
then
It's real.
like if the characters don't care, why should I? Like,
Yeah,
I don't know
that's
why.
actually a
I'll
good
take-
point.
it's just
But I have
again,
to
I'll
do
bring me the. I mean, for as terrible as the crossover's ending is, at least the characters acted like it mattered. I mean-
Pedro, about that plot twist, looks like we've got one. You son of a
That's
musician!
Perhaps this is no longer just a dream.
What?
Maybe. Alright, now it's time to spell some truth beans.
What a
for you,
twist!
Nova. Maybe this may have been a dream of Chopin, but it's also something more. Something that
Afterlife.
Chopin. Imagine something that Chopin and his conscience just happened to intercept,
Have
in a
I
way.
awakened?
in a sense.
At long last.
In this case now, Chopin has fully accepted of what's going on, and as a result, he is basically accepting this as reality, which will mean his real body will die succumbing
Why?
to tuberculosis, but his soul
The
will
dream was
live
at an
here.
end.
Now, there's the question: why the fuck would you do that if a world is in ruins? Here's where the
it
true
can't be.
nature of its word comes from.
Polka.
You may have got the hints here and there, but alright, let me explain this. Depending on the difficulty that you get when you do, like normal or in core mode, you get one
Thank
of
you,
two
everyone.
sequences here.
know it
In the
didn't
Xbox
last very
360
long,
version, you got only one,
but
which
really,
was very
this was the
weird. The
most
characters
fun I've ever
literally
had in my
talk to the
life.
player and break the fourth wall. It's a mess that I didn't even bother to show because it's pointless.
blow him a
So it's
kiss,
pointless for the sake of the ending.
I
So for the
wonder,
PS3 version,
Oh,
they
all in-
will
split.
it reach him up there?
Hold on, I split things into two. One that you get doing the normal playthrough,
I
and
hope
one that you
so.
get in core mode.
I
During
really
the
do.
normal playthrough, you get this next one we're gonna watch. The characters will still not talk to the player, but kind of like monologue to themselves and quote important parts of the game.
How weird.
Instead, for the one that you get in core mode, it's the one that will immediately appear after release. Basically, just edited so they are back to back.
Oh dear. We're back to the very first problem I had with the dialogue. Look at all that text. Again, I just get the feeling we're gonna be in a mood for a lot of talking. You know, that's not always a bad thing. But as Pedro said earlier, it feels like we spent more time talking than actually
Also,
developing these characters.
get used to weird camera angles because this sequence is chock full. It's borderline Gainax
Everything in the world
because of
slowly
it.
The most
fades
important,
Ah.
the most
It's very
important thing in
difficult to
a
remain
story,
still.
well, specifically a
Keep
conventional
things
creative
exactly as they
structure,
are
obviously, when it
just
comes to
one
something like
particular
2001, it's
moment.
different. But the most important thing about a story like this
because
is you
everything
have
shifts
to
only a little bit
have
at a
emotional
time,
depth and care and
no one really
interesting characters. If you
notices
don't
the
have that,
shift.
you don't have a story.
Not only
It's
that,
worthless.
But
It's
if you're
worthless.
in
not only
your
that, the
own dream,
visuals don't
how can
exactly
you
help
be so
convey it the best.
completely
But
positive
let's
that
go
what's
back to
happening
one
was
issue I
only a
had,
dream?
sort of tying into what Pedro had to
What
say
you're
about Polka not seeming to
experiencing in the
care.
dream is so
Again,
realistic
Yes.
to
let me
If
recap.
you allow
How
me,
can
Joe,
you
but
even
just
tell
one
what's
brief addition
actually
to
the
that.
real
Go
world?
on.
Yeah, you're just now thinking of this.
Are you
You
still
could have, I
messing
don't
around
know,
with that stuff?
blew him a kiss, give him
You need to
a
look
little
at things
kiss,
with your
a
own
little
2
consolation
eyes.
kiss, like at
See
least
things a
first
whole lot
base
clearer if
before
you're
you
always
jumped
looking at
in
them
there.
through
But
Good
no,
point.
now you're like seriously.
Well,
She just mouths
mineral
off, I
powder
love you,
does
and then
have
dies.
uses, you
You
know.
spent an entire
But just
campaign with
because
these
it's useful
people,
doesn't
and
mean
you
it
didn't
should
even
be
barge.
used.
Oh, by the way, here's goodbye, Viola.
They like the
Like you
convenience
didn't
of
even
it
say
so
anything.
much. They
Just
don't see the
seriously.
danger
Yeah,
they'll
to
be
compare
faced
this-
If you just don't care, why should I?
Yeah,
Go
for
ahead.
for
Unless
comparison's
someone
sake,
does
it's
something
like
about
if
this
the whole
soon,
plot
there
between
won't be
Phoenix Wright and
anything anyone
Iris
can
and
do
Trials
to
and
stop it.
Tribulations amounted to nothing
No
by
matter
the
how much
end.
time
Even though that's
passes,
kind of what the entire
will
game
remain.
was centered around to a certain extent.
A lifetime to
Like
build.
that, but yeah,
It
going
only
back to what
takes a
Polka has to say
moment to
again. Let me
destroy.
recap.
You know, human
Polka
beings
says
really are
something, I love
masters
you,
of
Alfredo.
destruction.
But no, the one person she actually talks to before
Are
dying
my feelings
is
real?
Beat about his photographs. A detail that I already
Was it all
mentioned,
just some
unless you
kind of
do the
illusion?
game
Mind,
mechanic.
Chopin kinda does the same thing before his boss
Everything
fight.
I've ever done
He
has
says,
always
"Oh, I'm
just
sorry,
been
Beat,
an
I will not be able
But
to
at
help you
least at the
longer."
end,
So
I
it's
want
like
to
the
be the
writers
real me.
want to tell something, but I don't understand myself what could it be.
But there are
Because Beat
some
is
things
not,
we must never
compared to the rest of
forget.
the party, like
No
a
matter
special
what.
snowflake.
See, here's the thing.
Tragic
With
memories
Frederick, I could be
that we
more
have to
understanding with
carve
Frederick
firmly
sort
in
of
stone.
rushing because, he's literally
So that
about
the
to
wind can
fight
never
them,
blow
so I
them
can get
away.
why he wouldn't want to build up the sentiments before the fight.
Listen, when you
Polka, though,
eliminate all the
again.
other
So, Polka,
possibilities,
the only thing that matters to you
you
about this
cannot
group, aside from the
escape
fact
the
that you
truth
love
that
Algretto, is Beat's photographs,
how
a game
difficult it
mechanic
may
that
be to
we
accept.
kind of consequently didn't even really do much of in this
You know, I've been
playthrough
thinking
because
about
it's
it a
not
lot.
even
And if I
required.
couldn't use
Like,
magic,
nothing about,
I don't
hey,
think I would've
Viola's
ever felt this
wisdom
desire
or
to
how
go
she
out
acts
and help
maternal.
other people
Nothing
like
Keep in
about.
mind, Jova, gameplay-wise, it will be useful because,
that
like
had
I
been the
mentioned, you
case,
use them to
I
sell
would have
them
never
in
set
shops
out
to
on
get
this
money
journey.
easily
And I
and
probably
buy
would have
them.
never had the chance to meet
The
you.
problem is that, not aside from the save file, Jova,
It's
I
because
will
of
say that
despicable
even in a
people
normal
like you
playthrough, you
that
don't really need
tragedies
them
like what
because
happened to
with
Claudius
just
occur
a
in the
very
first place.
simple grinding, I'm talking about just beating the monster
It's
when you need from
strange.
one
I
part of a
seem to
dungeon to
remember
the
the girl
other,
being much
you
more
have
beautiful
more
when
than
I was
enough
younger.
money
Wait.
for your heart's
Even
Oh my
though
content.
god,
there
something
aren't
from
as many lights
Crescendo?
then as there are now.
Yes, keep in mind again, characters are quoting lines from the
Oh.
game in a sense that when put together they form more cohesive story, which makes me going to the point that I was making, the true nature of the world. It's basically gonna be cemented in the cutscene after the second
There's
type of
no
ending
way
that you
she
can
could
get,
know what I'm going to
but let
do
me
before
try
I do
to
it.
construct it a
That
bit
doesn't make
near
any
style.
sense.
The first thing that we see in the game, if you remember, is
No one
still
knows what
Polka
they're gonna
committing
get before
suicide,
they drop.
like just like that.
That's why people
However,
can have hope
what
for
if
the
I told
future.
you that it's not
It
the
requires
same
much more
sequence,
courage
the
to
same
take a
ending?
step back
Why?
Alternate
than it does to
universes?
Here's
take a
what-
step forward.
Yes and no,
Would you not
Jova.
agree?
The word, this word,
After all,
regardless of
there is no guarantee
being
that there
Chopin's
will be
dream or
ground
not,
to stand
is
upon.
trapped in a never-ending cycle. Events repeat constantly.
Most people
Waltz
live
gets
their
the
lives turning
power,
their backs on
he
things
basically
too
tries to
difficult
destroy the
face.
world, Legato transforms and ultimately
Ignoring
destroys
what hurts you
the
eventually becomes
world as a
habit,
result
a
of the
natural
fight.
thing to do.
Polka has to sacrifice herself,
If we
and the
only allow
world
ourselves to see what
resets
we want to
all
see, we
every
just end up
time.
fooling
Because of
ourselves more and
Chopin's
more.
brain damage?
No. This is something that has
Why
happened
did
so
Polka,
far.
of all
However,
people, have to
as the
suffer
game
like
pointed
that?
out as well, in
What
this
the hell is wrong
iteration,
with this world?
Chopin himself has entered this as a result of
Let me
having
educate
this
you.
dream in
Nothing. Absolutely nothing lasts
due to
forever.
him having his
That's why,
tuberculosis.
for the short time
And
we're
that
here,
means something
you
has
gotta try to
changed
make
as
things
a
a little
result.
better.
Again, if you have noticed,
Putting
Chopin's
everything you've
interactions with the
into
plot is still
whatever it is you
relatively
do,
minimal. He takes
that's
this
what life is
distance. He
all
prefers to
about.
focus himself on thinking
If we're gonna be
if
saving
this
the
is a
world,
dream or
I at
not.
least want us to have
His
something to
weight
remember it all
is
by.
only for gameplay purposes, aside from the final sequence where he directly asks Waltz what is he gonna do, he doesn't interact too much also with the villains, aside from the sequence where maybe Fugue slashes him.
When one thing
Most of the
comes to an
time,
end,
he's more like a
something else starts up
spectator
right after.
than anything.
That's what they call
However,
a natural
his
order of
presence may
things.
have triggered something that may finally
I'd also
break the
like to help
cycle and
any
let
way
the
that I
world
can.
continue without having to be reset.
Things will be
That's
different.
Well, it had
basically
to
what it
say a
is.
little earlier on that she
I
was
won't resort
surprised
to
to
that
see
until
him
the
there.
last possible
True.
moment.
That, and also there was the fact that the cello
We're all
tree
in this
had
together.
countless
And as
had
long as we
fortunes
stick
that
together,
that old
work
lady
together,
basically, and the old
it'll
lady
work
said
out
that only
somehow.
Polka was also
We'll
always
make
able to
sure
go
it
there,
does.
which means all those bad fortunes are all the previous iterations of Polka getting a bad ending. But if you remember,
Emilia,
Polka in this case got a blank
I
fortune,
have
meaning
never
that
once forgotten
she
you.
could have chosen the fate
Not in all the time that you've
in
been
this
gone.
case. And this is the second type of ending.
Who would have thought that my
Chopin
memories of
basically
you
doing a soliloquium
could create
of
a world as vibrant and
recapping the
alive
entire
as
events of
this
the
one
game,
is?
but in his own manner.
It's something I'm
Basically,
sure
in a
not even
sense
you ever
of
could have
an
imagined.
imaginary dialogue that he's having to his sister.
It was such
And
a
he's saying, "Oh, I
stunningly
met these
beautiful
people
world.
and did this kind
I
of
found
things."
myself going on a very long journey.
It's
through
nice.
it.
Now here's the
The
thing.
adventure I shared with the wonderful
Even if
companions
the
I met in
game
this
has
world of
hinted,
dreams has left
not
me with
hinted, but
countless
also
memories
told
that I can
you
even
about
now
this,
recall with
I would
perfect clarity.
agree on the fact that it doesn't do a
Emilia,
good job
if
in
you could hear me say these
recapping the
things,
situation altogether.
I
It's
wonder,
not
would you
like
just
you
laugh
need
at me?
like a wiki or reading novels
I happened
to
to make the
understand this is
acquaintance of a
not
young girl in my
Final Fantasy
dream.
XIII trilogy level of cryptic,
A
but
girl
at the
with
same
an
time he
astro
could have
that
done a
glowed more
much
brightly
better
than any
job
other in this world.
in handling this twist
A girl who was
altogether.
Let me
forced to
say,
give up her
it,
life
it-
at the age
it's
of
kind of
13.
like Kingdom Hearts at its absolute worst,
I
when
spoke
it
with her,
just gets to the point where it's bogged down
it
in
was as though
all this
you
weird
were with
dialect,
me
and then
again.
there's actually some vague message, and then,
began to
oh, it
wonder
turns
if
out
she
it was
might
like
not in
this
fact
and all the
actually
thing,
be
and
you,
okay, so I have to
who have
piece
lived for
together
so
this or
long in my
that. I mean,
memories.
you know, you could consider it clever on some degrees,
But I see
but
now
it
that
does
I
feel
must
like
have
they
been
were focused
mistaken.
more on the big plot twist than they were constructing a story.
You see, Polka was someone who insisted on walking her own path
Was she now?
until the very end.
Well, technically, yes.
Emilia, she lived just as you would have.
I will
had you been
also
given the
say
chance
this
to do
though.
so.
Are they hinting? So wait, was my theory that this is the
Even
afterlife
now, it
is
seems I lack
correct,
the
or
necessary
is it like
No, this is like a complete
was
different
playing
world.
the piano
What
in
it may
Paris,
be like is an
even though I
alternate
existed in
dimension, a
reality,
place
I was
where
also
the
living
souls
a dream.
may get intercepted to. We don't know.
And now the
What
dream
we
that I
know
just
is
had
that Chopin
seems even
dreaming
more vivid than any
basically
reality.
allowed him to hijack to the
Emilia,
world itself.
But
If it had
so
been you,
It's
apparently,
very
perhaps you would have been able
Inception-esque.
to arrive at the
so
answer
him
sooner
apparently
than
killing
I.
people in this other world though allows him to survive his
But as for
disease.
me-
That's
And waking up. The idea
I
is
am
that
at
he
long last
resides
able to
the
make a choice.
connection and just goes back to
Though it's taken
reality.
me quite a
Remember,
while to
Jova,
make it.
the focal theme of
I
Chopin's
will
struggle
depart
is
the
to
reality
establish
where you and I
if
compose
this is
memories
actually a
together,
dream
and
or a
to
new
leave the
set
world
of
of dreams
reality.
where Polka
It's
lived my reality.
literally him
I
deciding
hope my
whether
choice does
this
not
is
bring you pain.
just him
You
hallucinating
must know
due to
that
his
I will never
comatose
forget you,
state,
after all.
or maybe there's something more and he's
Yes.
really dying and his soul is
For even
transported to
though my
something
form
else.
may
And
change,
the answer is something
his
in the
feelings are
middle,
something
just
that
like I
will
said.
not
It's
fade
not
away.
a clear answer like he wanted him to be, but at the
there
same
is
time,
one
it's
thing
something
that is certain,
a bit more
and that is
than
the
obvious.
fact
honest
can
question.
never
It's
return
nice
to
that
the
you
past.
summarize this for us, but does the game
When I
actually
heard the
say
music
in
written down
story?
upon a score,
Like I
Nope.
said,
the
in
notes
a
of the
second,
past
it's gonna show after
disappear from
this
my mind,
because it will
as if
become
swallowed up
incredibly
by the
clear.
darkness.
Fair enough. It's just like, well, the way you had to
And
sum it
then
up
in
makes it
contrast,
sound a bit
the notes that are
needlessly
going to be
complicated,
played in
and
the
I'm hoping
future
that the game will
sound
actually
clearly as bells
do
inside
that,
of my
because
mind.
I'll admit, in some
If there can
cases,
only
it
be
might have
one
been better
world
if
a
it
person
was
believes
just a
in,
dream in his,
then for
because
me,
again, you kind of have to
that
go
world
through
should
a lot of
Well,
weird
in that
shit.
case, Jova, you can always pretend, well,
Moving
have your
ever
own head
onward,
canon and say that the
a
band
world
ending
in
is
which you can
canon.
never turn
True, but I
back.
gotta judge what's on screen. And look, I'm not saying that
Yes.
it's the worst thing
Belief
whatsoever.
above
It's
all
just
else proves
also
Well,
existence.
that's again, like we repeated during this
Echoing
playthrough,
in the
Jova. The
eyes,
the simple fact
brilliant
that
to the ears,
the game could have
sweet to the
easily, but it could have
touch,
still be developed
smelling of
and
warmth,
properly explained better. It needed
unable
more
to be
time to
appreciated
be
by the
refined.
senses.
I mean, let me put it like this.
Astra.
In
Only
in
the
either a
light of
video
one's
game
Astra
or
can
a
truly
movie,
determine
when you
one's
have a
will.
scene where characters literally have to stand around, practically doing
dear
nothing
Polka,
but talking, and it's
in
not an
this
Ace
world that has
Attorney.
been set
There you go.
pacing
He's
with
also
you.
saying these like this: the war that
Lies
has
the
been set
path
free for
that
his
you've chosen
dream.
to follow.
Well, Jova, not necessarily. It
No, no,
depends
hold
on
on, let me
how
finish,
it's
let
done
me
and what
finish.
kind of plot you're
To
telling.
once again
Let me
choose
finish.
the path I
In a case
believe
like
in.
this, it feels like it's a last-minute ditch effort with how much text there is here. I'm not saying that that's what it is. I'm just saying what it feels like of, first impressions and whatnot because of how drawn out it feels. So
And there you go, Jova. We're now back at the beginning of the game. Don't worry, we're still going with somewhere here.
So is it ever explained why this world repeats itself like a music sheet? Oh, let me guess, it's like a music piece that repeats.
Kinda, that can be an interpretation. There's also the fact, Jova, what it's not explained is how Solfège actually knows about all of this. That is still unknown to me. So, and there you go. Simba falls, and the worry is that she comes back as a child in this place. That is also why there's a bit of a mystery behind their origins. Why it's only Solfège that caters to them. Why she doesn't have a father, stuff like that.
So, does the world always start with Polka just, being born like that? Because she's kind of a star child in that regard.
It's not. Sadly, no.
Death is a reality that is far too real.
Too real, man.
It's not even just that, Joe.
But I've walked
The big
this
problem is that,
dreamlike
again,
journey within a dream so that
to quote,
once and for all, I could
to quote The
accept
Anatomy
it.
of Story, which is an awesome book
And
about
now,
storytelling.
the time has
Like
come.
good writers
Everything
express
shall
their
come to
themes and
its
ideas,
finale.
which is what Jay was talking about, the themes and ideas of the game, through their characters in a natural way. Unless, of course, it's something more unconventional, like I said, 2001. The problem is that the only way, like you yourself said, Joe, but the only way the game has of explaining its themes and exploring it is by having the characters just talk about these things, regardless of how unrelated they are to their actual personal stories.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, it's an interesting story, but one that doesn't have the good connections to make for a fully fleshed out one.
And there you go, Jova. Without even checking his pulse, the doctor just said, "There you go, he's dead."
Okay, I know that doctors weren't as good as they were back then, but holy cow, man.
It's like I told you, Jova. This doctor is completely off the rocker. Like I really don't understand that.
So, this just
Go
in.
on,
Frederick
Pedro,
Chopin
sorry.
died because his mind took him to a mystical land that constantly repeats itself, and somehow him being involved fixed things. Huh. You were saying?
Don't worry,
Pedro?
Jova. The ending is still not over. Don't worry. Go on, Pedro.
It's just, again, like Theo mentioned Inception earlier. See, what happens is before we actually do have moments in Inception where the characters do technically explain. The reason we're explaining how the world, how the dream world works and how things work is because Leo has to train Ellen Page, so she'll be a capable architect to create the dreams that he needs so he can fulfill his mission. You know, like there's a justification in story why we're having so much talking.
Oh, Ellen
A lot
Page
of
was
times
in Inception? Interesting.
Ellen Page. You haven't seen Inception?
No.
Oh, well, you should. It's awesome.
I know
But,
about the meme, though.
Well, of course. Well, I can tell you she's definitely much better than in Beyond Two Souls, at least. But
That's gone.
yeah, Leo needs to achieve his heist mission. So, and he needs to train Ellen Page so she'll be a capable architect. So obviously, he needs to explain to her how things work, and by extension, it's explained to the audience. The themes and ideas and the exploration and the philosophical talks of this game, however, a lot of times it's just the characters talking about them in ways that are not really relevant to what's going on right now in the actual story, or even all that. It's just basically the writer just spewing. Basically, okay, maybe lecturing is too strong a word, but it comes across like that because it's just the writer stopping everything so he can. Now allow me to philosophize about this.
Anyway, Jova, there you go. Basically, now this time things are changing because Chopin now staying in his world is interfering with the cycle, and as a result, it's changing things for the fate of Polka.
And Solfège, you're still talking.
No, that's the thing. For now, the sequence is still going, but soon enough, things will change. And now he's basically remembering the metaphor that Polka said before about the flowers, about the heaven's mirror, or they're also called the flowers of death as a result because they only bloom at night. But now he's finally choosing what name to use, and as a result, he chooses the fate of Polka. In this case, to live. instead of being
On the grassy
forever
plain,
trapped in
they
this
painted
never-ending
pictures
cycle of life and death.
Because he can do that, I guess.
This time will defeat sin, don't you know?
Basically, Jova is what TV tropes call invoking Rule Zero.
Yeah, because this role, again, I'm trying. Okay, I get it overall. It's just this feels a bit like cheating in the case where, okay, it feels like it's such an arbitrary concept because they don't really explore the idea of this world in particular. It's just, is it an altered dimension?
If anything, Jova again, we don't explore this world to begin with. Like we don't have a clear map. We don't know too much about the geography. We don't know.
Which on its own wouldn't be that bad per se
Well,
if the story. Go ahead.
That's also what you're saying, Pedro. In a normal JRPG, it's not even that bad, but considering the nature of this game and what they insist of caring about the nature of this world itself, you think that we should have to know better. And there you go. This is where things start to change.
Not only that, but I'm just gonna sum it up like this. I think us dwelling on this possibly being Frederick's mind or dream kind of hurt the story because we wasted so much time on that, and we never really looked at any other possible alternatives aside from the fact that this world must
Jova,
be
it's a
real.
case where the story wants to have a cake and eat it too. It tries to do the whole is this a dream or not, but at the same time wants to tell a traditional JRPG stories with an evil kingdom trying to menacing a peaceful one, and a group of rebels trying to defeat an evil tyrant, which leads into monsters and a final boss.
Not only
Maybe
that,
that's the problem, a collision of two concepts.
Not only that, but the idea of this being some alien world really comes to flip out of nowhere, especially since, like you point out yourself, Teal, a lot of these characters represent a lot of Chopin's mind mentalities and whatnot.
It's kind of a thing like in The Wizard of Oz, like some character resembles some real-life counterparts, like, oh, you were here, and you were there too.
See, the thing with Wizard of Oz is that later books revealed that actually that world definitely is real for whatnot, and at the very least, we can excuse the fact that the characters were similar, but not entirely the same. Well, okay, that depends on which iteration of the book, musical, or movie you're watching, but in most cases, the characters are not technically meant to be representations of the stuff in Dorothy's mind. If anything, they're people who, reflect on people that she knows or whatnot. Whereas
it's not even explored upon. Like the whole fact that the Scarecrow looks like that other guy, it's just thrown off as a kind of a joke at the end anyway. It's not really you're not really supposed to pay attention to that. If anything, it's more like an in-joke of sorts.
Whereas here, the story, pretty much for the entirety of it, whinges on and on. Is this Frederick's dream or not? And I'm like, okay, if it is his dream, then, well, at the very least, you could say that we had some nice looks at the components of what he was like. However, making it not a dream, I would have expected it to be something like the afterlife, or, something more fantastical. But here, the fact is that they make this an actual mystical world, and I feel that maybe we should have just raised this option way earlier, because...
I think an ambiguous ending probably would have been the better option here, something like Akin to Inception.
Honestly, I think we're still getting an ambiguous ending.
Actually, Pedro, not to burst your bubble, but apparently if someone of the people, the team involved actually spoiled that.
I know, Michael Caine. Yeah, which is a shame because that was not the intention, but whatever.
I mean,
you can always ignore that statement, I guess.
Okay, I know. Okay, I'll just say this right now. It feels like the story is still going for an ambiguous state here and there because they don't explain much about this other world here.
Pretty much, what Joe was saying is
And I'll admit, as a result, I kind of feel mocked for caring about characters that weren't Polka or Frederick because essentially...
Viola is the worst offender in that case, if you know.
That's another thing. Like, at the end, the only relevant characters at the end are Polka and Frederick. The others are kind of just abandoned completely.
Never mind the fact that Allegretto is the guy we play as most of the time. At the very least, include Allegretto, because Allegretto was clearly kind of a big team player.
Don't worry, Joe, Allegretto at the very least is gonna play a part in this last sequence.
And again, it's all these weird concepts and whatnot. Okay, so this world repeats. Why? Like, that kind of implies that it has to be within some sort of mystical boundary that forces it to be like that.
Look at the bright side, Joe. At least the plot of...
anyone want to get some burrito?
look at the bright side, Teo. At the very least, the plot doesn't stop for 10 hours, so we can have multiple conversations about. But what if Sin can really be defeated? But what if not?
Honestly, Final Fantasy X at the very least committed to a lot of its stuff here and there, and we did get stuff neatly enough explained.
That's the thing. That's also the thing, Vojova. I understand better of Spira and the plot of 10, but the game doesn't let me care because, if I have to be honest, Spira is a very boring fantasy world.
Fair enough.
Compared to the other fantastical world that Final Fantasy has created, the world of 10 is one of the most boring ones. Also, still Tifosi.
That's part of why I prefer 10-2 better. Oh, so were the characters just sitting and standing around waiting and hoping that something would happen?
Basically, from a time perspective, this happened in a matter of seconds after Chopin got up.
She's glowing.
Because her Astra and the glowing goes around.
That's what you want to say?
Yes.
Hey, look! That symbolism is right up there with Men of Steel. Like, Zack Snyder would be so proud.
Ouch.
Well, at least this game is not as gloomy as Man of Steel, I guess.
No, but it's
Yay!
somewhat comparable in its pretension.
Feel moved by the triumphant music. Feel it.
No, sorry. I don't really feel anything. I'm sorry.
And why did we need to cut to that scene?
Because we need basically a perspective, and this basically heals the world without resetting it.
Heal the world.
How nice.
Yay! Everyone's a winner!
And the entire human race, except for Forte, Legato, and Rondo, I guess.
I guess.
And Tuba, unless he comes back.
And Fugue.
So, guess the apocalypse is over, everyone. Back to work.
And then it ends with everyone eating a shawarma.
Why is Frederick there?
Because
Remember, he
stayed.
accepted being in his world. He chose this to be his reality.
I will go more into why this confuses the fudge out of me in my final thoughts.
And
but
now let's end with another anime trope again. The fact that
kiss.
again, Allegretto and Polka scenes are now in love, and despite being like, she's 14 and he's like 16, I think. We're gonna kiss.
well, you know what? Honestly, it's about time. I mean, considering how
they're
much.
only 2 years apart, I don't see the problem.
No, not like that. I will say that despite the PS3 version trying to, hyping things up a bit more and trying to explain, reinforcing the sort of the relationship between Polka and Legato, this still kinds of clashes a bit.
Well, you know what? At the
I
very
would say, well, at least it's very a discretion shot here. It's not like right in your face, so
Hey,
there
look.
you go.
Look, considering how Polka was literally monologuing about if she should have kissed him while she was
And there
supposedly
you
gonna
go,
die.
that's what's gonna happen. Frederick is dead, but now he decides to live in this world with the new friends he acquired. Bit of a shame for the one he left in the real world, but oh well, he was burdened with tuberculosis, and he had the moments we seen said he had a shitty life anyway, so I guess this is for the better. Now, what happens here now, Jova, you have to treat it only on a symbolical level. Basically, Jova, basically don't bother with this. This is not technically part of the anime. This is just what they do to cut to the credits. Basically, Jova, what do you say? One last song for old time's sake?
To soothe to soothe the people who he's leaving behind? Even though...
More like again, having an excuse to have a specific song for the credit. If you remember, Jova, there were 2 people in the room outside of the doctor. One was George Sand. The other was that a singer that Chopin met at a young age, Costanza. She had a Russian name. I forgot the name. Apologies to all Russians everywhere because she's quite famous. And they performed duets doing all the life without necessarily being in romantic sentiment. So, for cutting to the credits having a song, this is represented by Chopin playing the piano, and they're actually singing a song in Italian.
What now?
This is because, Jova, it's not necessarily opera, but when it comes to artistic singing, for the time being, Italian was the dialogue chosen mostly for that.
So does she hear him playing the piano?
Again, Jova, you're not supposed to treat this particular sequence as part of the ending anyway. It's like
It's
I'm
it's
guessing
admittedly
it's
hard for
because-
me to tell because of how the story tends to treat everything so seriously.
true. Basically, that last shot with Allegret and Polka kissing was the final one you were supposed to be carrying.
Well, Teo, I'm guessing it's because you guys kick ass at opera, so there's that.
Yes, and there's the fact that due to how it's constructed, Italian language favors itself due to how syllables of the words are constructed. They ease themselves up a bit more for rhyming and for singing, so they adapt themselves a bit more to the music. Not to mention, the Italian language has been used for artistic media since the Middle Ages, for poems, writings, and stuff like that. And there you go. That's basically how
That's
it
very
is.
nice, Chopin. That's very nice, motto. But can we have? I have a better one. Can we play? God, what's the name?
The nameless song.
Largo Fa... What was it?
The nameless song, the one over the credits of Dark Souls. That's also very peculiar. Anyway, there you go. That's your.
Poor Sam Rico. People can't seem to decide if his
Also,
last
pay
name is
attention
spelled
a
with...
bit. Salsa and March are credited as Emmy Rose.
Wait, yes, Salsa was voiced by Amy Rose.
Oh
That's
my
right.
god.
That's right. Salsa and March were voiced by a fictional character.
Yes.
That's the best plot twist in this entire game.
It all makes sense now.
Totally. Anyway.
Oh, Stephanie Shea.
Yeah, like I mentioned all of these voice actors.
There you go. Mana was Ludwika. There you
And
go.
Cindy Robinson was
Ludwika.
Soulphage. Whoa,
Ludwika.
Cindy Robinson really has a lot of range.
Anyway.
Oh, look at that, look at that, look
Oh,
at
there you
that!
go,
Sam
the
Rico
Infanteria
again!
Siviglia,
But
the
this
Barbaro.
time spelled differently in this last
Anyway,
name.
start freely with your final thoughts. Well, I'll start with, well, not my final thoughts properly, but I'll start with a sort of a premise. With a sort of a, not rhetoric, but an introduction question. When do you had a time where you had a dream that was very knitted? Like almost as if you thought it was the most real to you.
It's called
I
lucid
cannot-
dreaming, isn't it?
Kinda. Sure,
Lucid
it's
dreaming
different
is
than
when you can manipulate
it's
the
kinda
dream.
it's kinda different than say dreaming in open eyes. Like I say that you're spazzing out a bit while still supposedly awake. I'm saying something that you happen when you actually sleep. You know, I can't answer this question myself because unfortunately. It's probably due to my memory and everything, but it's been a long time since I had an actual decent knitted dream. So I don't know this kind of feeling, at least not on such a detailed level. But if you had try to think that as, I guess, also part of the inspiration behind this project. That being said, now I transition to my final thoughts. Like I stated at the beginning of this game, I think this game aged terribly, and it's still not. It's gonna get worse and worse by the years. However, as the more time passes, anyway, I still recognize that this is more a guilty pleasure than anything because back when, especially also when first commented on this, kind of like I had a bit more, better opinion on this, but the problem is that the more time passes, the more bad things I start noticing about this, and unfortunately this is the case where they bog down the product big time. Not in a sense, for example, on a gameplay level, because let me start with the positives. The gameplay, for example, is superb. I will state that I want a spiritual successor of this. This is a thing that Peter mentioned before, the fact that this should need a remake properly. I would say not even that. This needs to be left like this, not even like having a remaster or something, and just have a spiritual successor, something with the same style of gameplay, but with a new, different plot or concept altogether.
Allow me. This is the story of Mozart on his dying bed from pneumonia.
And Salieri is the ultimate evil, yes.
Yes. Hey, Amadeus was an awesome movie, so sure.
Anyway, what I think is, because the gameplay on its own is very solid, and for me, for example, it says already all the product, because it's really, I'm sorry if I didn't show you that much during this run. Again, I apologize for the audience if you wanted a more gameplay-oriented run. But unfortunately, it's more of a thing that you enjoy if played and not shown, because unfortunately this is bogged down by the fact that most of the game bosses and late-game enemies are very, very annoying sponges that absorbs all of your attack, and just let you have fights that almost never ends, like test of patience, like I said. However, the presentation also, the fact that the art style is fantastic, T-posing aside, that's a problem of coding.
That's its own
That's
problem.
more so
And
animation.
the music is fantastic. Yes, not probably the most original that Motoi Sakuraba has been, but damn, he tries at
Yeah.
least. And now he has a proper orchestra here instead of having to use synthesize, like say in Star Ocean or many other Tales of games. This was one of the first titles where he tried to diverge things up a bit, and it shows because there are some minor elements that will be reprised and expanded so much, like I mentioned in Dark Souls, which will be the one point where he will shift his musical style to a different kind of where he will become almost unrecognizable. However, sadly, everything else just doesn't work. And I think for the lack of being not being repetitive, and for the sake also of the other guys who mentioned this in their fan thoughts, the plot is just a mess that can be savage no matter what you do, and the characters are not developed as much as we would want. Despite this, however, like I said, it's kind of a guilty pleasure to me. I still kind of enjoy playing this from time to time, and well, I will know just now that it's sadly bad as a result, and I guess I will try to focus on the positive things. Anyway, before you start with your final thoughts, Jova and the others, we have not an extra credit scene, but something that was added at the end. I guess because I have no idea. A small tale.
Eh? Let me guess, PS3 version exclusive?
No. This was also in the Shape of Life, narrated by Jameson Pierce. So sit tight, children, as Papa Near tells you a story.
Okay. Wait. Huh. A snail?
One day, the caterpillar asked the snail, "Mr. Snail, you know many things. Could you tell me what kind of shape is the shape of life?"
That's a very weird question.
The snail nodded and answered, "Well, Mr. Caterpillar, I think that maybe life is red, like a ripe tomato."
Okay.
The caterpillar laughed happily and said, "No, Mr. Snail, I didn't ask about the color of life. I asked you about the shape."
Philosophy!
Well, what about the shape of water?
And pondered.
So, which came
Then
first,
he
the chicken or
answered,
the egg?
"Well, Mr. Caterpillar,
In this case, the
I
caterpillar or the
think
snail.
that maybe it has a sweet scent, like a pot of honey." The caterpillar let out a disappointed sigh
Oh.
and said, "No, Mr. Snail, I didn't ask about the scent of life. I asked you about the shape." The snail nodded and pondered and thought some more. And then
Snail's
he
a little
answered,
slow on this.
"Well, Mr. Caterpillar, I think that maybe it murmurs like a babbling brook." The caterpillar finally broke down and
I mean,
The
fine.
caterpillar is
shook
done
his
with your
head
shit.
and said,
Literally.
"No, Mr. Snail, I didn't ask about the sound of life. I asked you about the shape."
Just tell me, goddammit.
It's shaped like a book.
It comes full circle.
The snail nodded and pondered, and at
There we go,
long
it's a
last,
circle,
he
let's go.
finally answered, "Well, Mr. Caterpillar, I think that maybe it has a sharp, sweet flavor, like a juicy cherry."
You mean the one that Pac-Man eats?
I swear to God.
Losing his patience, the caterpillar grew very angry and said, If you don't want to answer me, then fine. I'm not going to ask you any more, Mr. Snail.
Good day to you, sir.
And with that, the caterpillar turned around and went home.
However, there's a moral, still.
When he was gone, the snail nodded and said, "Oh, Mr. Caterpillar, you already knew the answer."
Say what now?
Hold on.
Okay.
Happiness, disappointment,
Oh.
sorrow, anger. These are the sights, smells, sounds, and tastes.
Actually,
Life
those
can
are all
take
just
on
feelings, but
many
I
different
digress.
shapes.
Anyway, moral of the story, Mr. Snail is a dick. Moving on.
Wow.
Seriously.
Snails are dicks.
There you go. Thank you for playing.
Thank you so
I-
much for playing this game.
I guess. And there you go. That's how it ends. You also have to reset the game. There's no like.
What the hell was that?
I don't know, Krusty. Basically, that's the final summation of the entire game. But anyway, that's pretty much it from me. Pedro, go on, be the first.
Okay, so that final story thingy with the snail and the caterpillar, that perfectly sums up the big problem with this game. The fact that this game cannot, for the life of itself, focus on what really matters and just keeps, it keeps diverging into tangents that are unnecessary and just come off as what? And like seriously, what?
And at the end,
what?
it tries to say that it was part of a plan all along.
Yeah, sure. Okay, this part has already gone for long enough, so I'll be quick. Like Teo said, the combat system is great. The art, I really love the art style. It's just a shame that the art director didn't know how to properly encapsulate the awesomeness of the art style into the actual models, not just because of the rudimentary animations, but because even the character models sometimes could be a bit better than what they are. I think something a bit more cell shade could have helped them look better. But anyway, the music is fantastic as well. So yeah. But the biggest problem with this game to me is that, again, like that final line, that line with this, it was perfect. Happiness, disappointment, sorrow, anger. Because this game is incredibly original in its concept. Like, I have never seen a JRPG with this very concept of an idea. We're playing inside the mind of a somewhat obscure classical composer. I mean, I'm not saying people know about Chopin, but he's definitely not the first name that comes to mind.
It's like
when
what
it comes
Jova
to
said.
classical music.
It's like what Jova said. Like compared to Mozart and Beethoven, Chopin is like mid-tier. But go on.
Also, Jova, come on. A game inside Mozart said, that's just a cliche option. I want to see an Eternal Sonata spiritual successor where we're exploring the mind of Carl Stalling. Now that would be epic.
How
For those who don't
about
know,
Louis
Armstrong?
Or Bob Ross, we're fighting trees everywhere.
For those who don't know,
Or
Carl
Ray
Stalling
Charles. Again, imagine seeing the world through Ray Charles's eyes.
For those who don't know, Carl Stalling was the composer for the classic Looney Tunes shorts from the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. I want to see the inside of his mind. But anyway.
Or Aretha Franklin's.
Okay. Yeah, this game has some interesting ideas and an incredibly creative premise. Here's a problem. The director/writer had no idea how to properly encapsulate these concepts and ideas into a properly formed story, because it's the only way it can convey its themes and ideas is by having the characters blabber on and flat out explain the stuff to us. And like I've said, read John Truby's Anatomy of Story, great book. Good writers express their themes and ideas in a natural way via the actual story situations and the characters' interactions, not by having the plot stop so that the characters can just blabber on into philosophical debates that don't have anything to do with anything. But the biggest crime, like I've been saying, is the character. The characters they're not terribly made or anything. It's not like this is Fair Fence Ref or anything. It's just that they're so shallow. I mean, what do we know about Viola? Let's think about Viola, for example. What do we know about Viola?
And what reason does she have to tag along anyway?
She
after a
was a
Exactly.
while?
shepherd girl, and apparently I think she was mad at Forte for messing with her
Yes, for
area.
her goats, and the fact that she wanted to give her contribution to, with the Andantino forces. She also mentioned it, like, say, oh, I joined Andantino after the keep. But the problem is that her presence after a while is pointless. The last important thing that she does is that lucky charm thing where she tries to say that she's in love with Jazz, but she's rejected, and that's it.
That's exactly the thing, Teo. The most memorable moment of Viola to me is the revelation that Jazz makes her wet. That's literally the only noteworthy moment of Viola that I can remember, and not for a good reason. I only remember it because it's so stupid, because it's brought up only to be immediately discarded
Which
into the
reminds me
garbage
again.
pile.
Which reminds me again the other thing I mentioned. Remember, guys, what I mentioned the game established that she has her pet Arco, and it shows up for random little free cutscenes, and the last one is like a 2/3 of the game. We don't even see it for the ending. Why even have it?
It's like if Avatar: The Last Airbender just had Momo appear, and then he doesn't show up until like the finale or something, because we actually
or
had
even worse,
that
Joe.
with
But
us.
the last moment it's seen is like at the end of book 2. Suppose it's like
I'm in the middle of
yeah. Let's continue, Pedro. Sorry.
Okay. It's just okay. Again, the characters are shallow, like Viola, Allegretto and Polka. I'm supposed to care about their romance, but the romance is so by the numbers and cliche anime shit that it doesn't come across as anything. Like it's just there because it's just there because they know that some anime weeboos will go and shit and draw fan art on DeviantArt or something about it. Like it's just so, and as a result, the characters are a big part of this, and they're shallow, and as a result of their shallowness, you stop caring, and if you stop caring, you're not going to be interested in putting up with the philosophical meanderings, because you don't care. Like it just comes across as lectures. And again, it feels to me like the director was more interested in giving us a history lesson on Chopin than actually creating a proper game that stands on its own. Because this game only has like the biggest, like, here's the target audience that I can get for this game: people who love Chopin. That's the primary target audience of this game, from what I can tell. Here's the problem.
Secondaries being people who like music, like me, because
For example, I
I
was still very ignorant before playing this game, but now I know, and I still end up liking it. So mission accomplished, I guess.
Oh, I'll definitely give them that. It's just it could have been done
no,
better.
I can agree, but I may be more of an exception than anything. But continue.
Don't get me wrong. I can already tell from what we've heard from this game that Chopin's compositions are great. I'm not at all saying that Chopin shouldn't be more recognized. Probably, judging from this game, yeah, probably he should. But at the same time, we're supposed to be telling a story and a world here. Like we need something more. We could, like, if you wanted to have, like, if you wanted to get people to know Chopin more, you could have done this for some other method. I don't think doing it via a fantasy JRPG is the correct way to go. I mean, it just feels weird that they would take this route. I mean, it's like I said, the characters are not very good. So, and as a result, the plot just kind of meanders, and it becomes very shallow as a result. And as a result, I don't care. I'll take anything. First, I'll take any of the wacky, completely off the wall plot twist of the Layton series over it, because at the very least, I actually cared about what was going on with the characters in those games. Like, which is why I'm much more willing to put up with those. Like, I'm not willing to put up with any of the philosophical stuff in this game because the game hasn't got me invested. And if I'm not invested, then there's nothing. There's nothing there. Like, it's not. This game could have been an amazing, incredibly creative product, but the director had no idea how to properly convey his ideas into a properly formed story, and that's the big problem. There's incredible potential. Like there's there is a good game, a great game even somewhere in here, but it's buried under a shit ton of terrible decisions in terms of storytelling and overall planning. Like it's sad because this game, this is not at all. This is clear. You can tell this is a passion project. I mean, this is not the kind of game you would see being made by committee, by executive mandate or anything. This is clearly a passion project from someone who had a unique idea, but it doesn't work because again, it boils down to this. It's the same reason why the whole 2010 reviews of Heavy Rain are bullshit about the innovation part. You can be as innovative and creative as you want. If the execution sucks, then your game will end up sucking as a result. It doesn't matter how creative it is. You still, the execution is important. You know, like Teo was mentioning in Tales of Xillia earlier as his favorite PS3 game. Tales of Xillia is a derivative game, as all Tales of games are when you get right down to it. I mean, they all drink from a lot of the typical JRPG tropes, but the execution is where it's at because they know how to execute those tropes well. This game, on the other hand, tries to avoid those typical tropes for the most part, at least, and but it doesn't know how to properly use them in a meaningful way, and that's what kills the game to me. Don't get me wrong, the game is still good to play, but even
it shouldn't be treated as an arcade experience because of its very nature, and that's the problem.
Teo, I once said that to you in our reference episode, and I'll answer exactly what you answered to me. Yeah, but it's not enough. It's a JRPG. It needs more.
That's the not the tagline, but the perfect summation of this game. It's not enough. Even with the PS3 version fixing up things, it's still not enough. Sadly.
No, again, it's happiness, sorrow, disappointment, anger. Thank you. That line. Those are my 4 phases when I first played this game, and and like Teo said, it hasn't gotten any better over the years.
So that story at the end is quite apt.
Well, the line more like, but like I said, sure, that one final storyline. What the fuck was that? What the hell does that have to do with anything? It's not even them. It's like, okay, if it was a story that was reflecting on the themes of the game, I guess it would be fine. But that fucking thing came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
What the fuck was that? Don't get me wrong, it wasn't terrible or anything, but it again, like I said, it perfectly shows what the main problem of this game is. It can't focus itself on its own ideas. But that's about it. Go ahead, Shiroi. What do you think of the game?
Well, I mean, the music and the gameplay themselves are great. My only issue is with the story. I mean, everything we got at the end was all fine and dandy, but we needed more of that in between, and there wasn't. There was also a habit of introducing plot points and then dropping them immediately.
Yeah, that too.
Like never hearing from them again, kind of thing.
That rebellion thing inside Andantino. Like, why?
Like, I would just gonna ignore that. It's fine. But yeah, that's really my only huge issue, is that there's so much that's not here. As you guys said, it's just incomplete. And also, I don't really hate anyone on the cast. I think a couple of them are pretty stupid.
Really?
But I don't really hate any.
Except for Serenade.
I hate Crescendo and Serenade, but there you go.
That's like a whole different story, though.
Sure.
But they're really inconsequential.
Yeah.
They're kind of just fodder in this world, aside from 1 or 2 or so.
Not just them, Shiroi. When you get right down to it, Polka and Frederick are pretty much the only characters that even the game claims are important. The others are just kind of along for the ride when you get right down to it.
The Andantino movement is given like a big fuss, but you don't see that much of that rebellion nor the effect of it. It's similar to Final Fantasy VIII, where the town of Timber is struggling against the city of Delling, but it's suppressing them. But like after the end of Disc 2, you're not supposed to care about that anymore. Sorry.
No.
Anyway, continue.
Oh, sorry. I mean, Allegretto specifically, like, it's almost like he knows how inconsequential he is, because he's always trying to stick his nose in the plot every so often. He's like the ultimate I'm helping character in this cast. really. But yeah, they just don't really mean a lot. So even though we're supposed to feel something towards the end, we really don't, other than confusion and annoyance.
Mm-hmm.
And
Anyway.
that's all I have to say, really.
All
Go
right,
ahead, Jova.
Jova.
Close us off.
Okay, I'm going to sum things up first by saying this is what I'm going to call. I don't know whether to call this a noble failure, a guilty pleasure, or just a mess that can actually be pretty fun, but it could have easily not have been a mess. I'll start with the basics here. First off, the gameplay is very, well, the battle play. The gameplay overall is nice and fun, and honestly, if there were more gameplay than story to deal with here, this would probably be a more fun experience. And you know what? If you're here just for gameplay, then you'll probably have a good time considering how unique this gameplay is. However, there are still some quirks in there, like certain boss sponges and whatnot, but those could easily be dealt with. Here's the issue, though. The story has way too much of a presence to simply ignore. Like, let me put it like this. If you're buying this game just for the gameplay and you're like one of those, I'll just skip the cutscenes one, and I'm going to say this right now, it feels like the story is the dominant presence here. As in, like, well, when you actually cut out the story, there's not as much gameplay to be had. Now, granted, maybe that doesn't include all the grinding or whatnot, but look, I go back to the prime example of Final Fantasy VII. Maybe that's cheating in some regards considering how massive that game is, but Final Fantasy VII is kind of like the thing that got JRPGs to really beefing themselves up. Final Fantasy VII, to me, has pretty much just as much story to complement as much gameplay, meaning if you're more a fan of the gameplay, then while there may be cutscenes or whatnot, those won't feel as dominating because there's just as much story as there is gameplay. Whereas with here, it feels like the story is there massively to the point where it's gonna take up a good portion. It's like if Metal Gear Solid 4 weren't as fun, because Metal Gear Solid 4 still at least has a good story. Now, okay, this wouldn't be a bad thing, but the story is the major problem with this game. Because, look, the concept of this game essentially lives and dies on its story. Yes, the gameplay is all nice and well, but let's not forget, this is a game meant to get people more familiar with Frederick Chopin. And look, I'll give it right this, the game definitely educated me a lot more about the guy. I am a lot more knowledgeable about him thanks to this game, and I've developed an interest in him and his music.
Which reminds me of another thing, Jova. Like, you're more into music anyway. How do you think fares in regards of teaching about music and when it comes to actual music itself?
It teaches well enough about Frederick Chopin and his music, but actually doing music yourself, maybe I didn't see any. Okay, I don't really know if there are many elements of the game that teach that, but it's kind of more. It felt a lot more basic. Like, I guess there's that one point where you actually have to memorize how the notes sound on a piano. But other than that, I'd say Zelda Spirit Tracks does a better job teaching you music.
Okay.
But yeah, look. I feel, though, that this game could have done a lot better of a job because, look, if a player is easily bored, chances are they may put this down and just skip past the cutscenes that teach about Frederick Chopin. And there is a good or better way to teach this sort of stuff. Like, Professor Layton never really does actual historical stuff, but Professor Layton does do some actual educational stuff along the way in its story, sometimes even mixing that in with the gameplay. I feel that maybe we could have done something where we have memories based off of Frederick Chopin and we have to play through those. Only here's the problem. The ending plot twist. That was my biggest fear, was what the ending plot twist was going to be. Now, okay, if this were actually in Frederick Chopin's mind, we could have had a lot of gameplay segments that are dedicated to moments based off of his childhood, his past, or whatnot. But nope, it turns out this is just an alternate dimension with people that just happen to be like him, only it's to the point where, like, holy cow, these people were pretty much crafted to be components of his mind, not something that's a coincidence like Wizard of Oz, to the point where you wonder, well, why wasn't it just inside his mind? I mean, especially since thematically it makes more sense, and they would have had to explain less. By making this an alternate world that is somehow connected to Frederick, not only that, a world that repeats for reasons not explained, they spend a lot more time having to explain, oh, well, you see, this is how it actually went, and I'm just like, I don't care. Like, that's a sad thing. It's like, well,
Yeah.
the characters. I was growing to like most of the characters, to an extent. They are not the best JRPG characters, but they had interesting designs and actually some interesting things to say and think about. Problem is, that all is deemed irrelevant. And you know what? I would have been more okay if it were deemed irrelevant because it's Frederick Chopin's dream, because it would make sense. He's the guy in charge of everything. But no, this is actually a living, breathing world in and of itself, and to make actual characters inconsequential like that feels, well, I know it's not the intention, but it feels like I'm being made fun of for caring about these. I was actually going to like Allegretto. You know, he's the skeptic. He takes things in stride. Beat had potential. Granted, they kind of just stooped to eventually doing running jokes with him, except for the few times when he would get out of his turtle shell here and there, but I digress. Viola was wasted, like, in character, concept, and whatnot. Jazz was, okay, if Allegretto weren't, like, the lead protagonist, Jazz would be the next candidate, if only because while he doesn't get to have as much time to shine, Jazz is a character who pretty much is no nonsense. When stuff goes wrong, he actually gets to solving the problem. Like, the minute he gets the message to Crescendo, he's off to talk to Crescendo and talk some sense into him. Like, Jazz doesn't take crap easily. Claves! Let's see. She was around. She was Jazz's lover. She died. She gave a long speech. Then she finally actually died for real. We go back. Turns out she's alive, but she's optional. We go for this long dungeon. Get pieces of her souls, no matter whatever that means. And, she's back alive and telling us what it was like to be dead. Hooray! I've already ranted enough about Crescendo and Serenade. It's just, they are the worst. The absolute worst. Serenade is a little bit worse than Crescendo, if only because Crescendo has good intentions on the top, and I don't care how many times Serenade says she has good intentions, she acted selfish. At the very least, Crescendo was doing it for someone else. He was still incredibly stupid, but he wasn't as selfish as Serenade. Salsa and March, I'm going to be quite honest, Salsa feels like the character who you think you're going to be annoyed by, but honestly, I ended up liking Salsa only because, again, she's one of the more productive characters who can get stuff done when she puts her mind to it. March is a similar case, you know, she gets stuff done, she's obviously the more mature one, and of course they're voiced by the same person because twins. They're nice, but again, I wish the story could have done more with them. And speaking of doing more with stuff, falsetto. What are you even trying to do? Like, okay, there's like this there's one character arc where apparently she may or may not have, no, actually she did love Jazz. She may have known that Claves was a spy, but it's really unclear on that, and she's here and back on her feet now to help stop Rondo. And that's pretty much what falsetto is there for. Kind of a shame. In fact, everyone attached to Andantino feels like they kind of got the worst treatment when you get down to it, except when we talk about the villains. I think I covered all the heroes. Except for Frederick himself. Yeah! I'll get back to him in a bit. Let's go to the villains. Rondo. I'm crazy and evil, and I got purple hair, but now I got white hair when I'm dead. I'm dead. Like, I mean, okay, it seemed like they have a rivalry with her and Fugue going on every now and then. And hey, that postcard that showed her arm wrestling with Forte shows she may have some bout of superiority. Yeah, that's the thing about those postcards. Those postcards seemed like they were teasing to me a much more fun
this is the
story.
thing I forgot to mention, Jova. Some of those postcards are actually depicting the characters, what are they doing after the ending.
I thought so. You know, wait, hold on. So that means Forte, Fugue, and Rondo are alive?
Some of them, not all of them.
So what is the case with Forte, Fugue, and Rondo then?
I think it's just a thing of, like, not canon fucking around.
But that's the thing, though. It's kind of like when I see a side art in a thing like Blast.
Remember, Jova, allow me to use a specific term. You know what four comas are? Basically, panels at the end of a manga chapter that are like non-canon events that are usually depicting comical stuff.
Yeah.
That's what it kind of is.
Yeah. You know, when I see something like that in a project like this, I feel like they should have actually been part of it, because I get that they're silly and supposed to be comical, but it would have fleshed out the characters so much more. Like, I'd have liked to have seen the villains actually doing the leisurely stuff or whatnot, or just, doing funny stuff like this. You can still have them be psychopaths, but you can also have them be funny about it, still have them come off as human in some regard. Which goes to my complaints about the villains. Tuba was essentially just a preliminary... Not even just that. I mean, okay, so he's fat, but he still manages to put up a good fight. But Tuba is literally just there to be like the preliminary boss saying, this is the guy you're going to fight before you get on to the main bad guys. And then it's just moving up the ladder with Fugue.
Technically, no, Jova. Fugue was the taste of that.
Well, what I mean is like, Tuba's the first guy you can actually beat.
Yeah. Anyway, go on.
Fugue! Oh god, poor Fugue. Like, Fugue starts off being legit intimidating. He's a calm, clear-spoken psychopath. So it's interesting to see parts where he gets jealous because Rondo gets better treatment or this or that. And then his stuff just goes off the rails. Okay, we beat him. And then he just goes off saying, I'll be back! And then he's kind of just a joke. Like, I honestly thought if anyone was going to go first, it would have been him. But no, Rondo ends up dying despite her being clearly stronger for
Remember, in the Xbox 360 version, in the Xbox 360 version, Fugue dies in the second fight before it.
And that's the problem. I feel that ending may have been more dignified for him because what happens when he does actually die? He gets gobbled up by a glowing bout of light. Of which I am still not quite sure the nature of. Like, Fugue went from being legit threatening to a joke, and I get that sometimes that's about a character progression. The problem is that we barely see him between these bouts. It feels like somebody just flipped a switch, and boom. And then there's Forte. Forte.
Just give me a moment. Just give me a moment, Joe, because I found that quote that I was looking for. It should add to what you're saying. I found the John Truby quote that I was looking for. Good writers express their moral vision slowly and subtly, primarily through the story structure and the way the hero deals with a particular situation.
Well, that doesn't always have to be the case for every story.
Instead of having the characters lecture us, but go ahead.
Yeah, true. That's a good point, Major. Well, that doesn't have to be the case for every story. This was definitely a story that would have benefited more from that kind of story structure. And speaking of which, let's talk about Waltz, whose name I keep getting mixed up with Forte because Waltz is kind of weak as a bad guy. Like, I'll be quite honest, Legato would have been a more interesting villain. Like, Legato is someone who is charismatic, very kind and polite, but under that guise is definitely a cold, calculating guy who, when he sees the opportunity, he snatches it. Whereas with Waltz, I honestly feel like if it weren't for Legato, Waltz would have just ran his kingdom into bankruptcy because, well, I'm crazy. Well, sure, he has some interesting voices here and there. Liam O'Brien does do him as much justice as he can. But the writing can't seem to decide whether or not they want to make him an animaniac or an actual legit threatening villain from time to time. Like, he just shrugs stuff off saying, oh, I know some of my top men are being killed or whatnot, but they were a waste and they deserve to die, and things will keep going according to plan. A plan that I am not exactly sure of because this plan kind of changes from phase to phase. Like, one minute, he just wants to conquer. Next, he wants to destroy. Except not. He just wants to somehow be a legend forever, which again goes back to why wasn't this just a part of Frederick Chopin's mind? Because like Tio said, Waltz represents that ego bit of Chopin, but it turns out, no, it's not in his mind. It's some alternate universe. So does this mean that Waltz was aware of the fact that the world constantly reboots and wanted to be remembered forever? Except no, because, again, the story really just brings that plot point in without really exploring it and giving it the needs it needs. And speaking of Legato, even though he's a better villain, man, does he end up going out like a chump. Downing the potion, becoming that big thing that later gets a recolor of itself. Like, I get that recolors aren't always considered canon, but it does seem a bit jarring when the beast that a lot of this villain's plot was built up to turns out there's just another copy of it hanging out here. Just saying. Yeah, that's the villains covered. Now let's talk about Frederick Chopin, the actual protagonist, because as you'll remember, I pointed out how it feels like he's not really at the forefront often, and how it never feels like we get focus on him. Now, there have been plenty of shows or whatnot that do that whole hidden protagonist thing, a notable one being Higurashi, where you don't realize who the real protagonist is until after 4 different arcs or whatnot. Here's the problem with this one, though. Frederick is clearly the focus from the get-go. Like, you know from the get-go it's about him. Like, whether or not the game description on the back of the game box describes it, you're pretty much opening up with this scene of a sick Frederick Chopin, and then the question immediately is like, hey, is this Frederick Chopin's dream, or is this real life, or is this or that? Like, from the get-go, the problem is that the story at times doesn't seem to care about it, which again hurts the thing. Like, again, if this were a much more better-known musician or composer or whatnot, maybe there wouldn't be as much responsibility. Don't get me wrong, it would still be an issue, but at the very least, it's someone people are more familiar with. But this is something that's meant to get people more familiarized with Frederick Chopin. And while the lectures and text dialogues are nice and everything, how about seeing some actual character from Chopin himself? Like, history books can very well show or whatnot, like... Again, I get that some things are left up to interpretation, but the game actively does not even have you play as Frederick for a good portion of the game. And you can't go, oh, we were trying to fool you or everything, because no, you made it clear from the get-go Frederick is the one we're supposed to focus on. Like, it feels like somebody got scenes mixed up in the ordering process, which I honestly do have to wonder considering how much of a mess the story is. And you know, I will say this, it is kind of a guilty pleasure to me with how crazy the story can be. Well, that and the lopsided animations. Yeah, let's cover that. The animation in this game was which is a shame because the artwork, the character designs, the outfits, those are nice and interesting. Definitely very good. The monster designs could have had a bit more variety to them, but they get the job done. Music, though, was definitely nice, and again, I wish we could have seen more actual remixes of Chopin's music to fit the theme, like the final boss. That was actually nice and clever. Again, it trails back to how Frederick himself doesn't feel that important until literally he's brought up to the forefront. It's like if all of a sudden Final Fantasy VII, again, I go back to that game, imagine if, per se, Final Fantasy VII decided all of a sudden, hey, Katsif is actually the protagonist. And it's like, okay, even if you hinted at that, you didn't really do a good job at grinding him up to be the main protagonist. But, yeah, kind of a shame about that. Again, the gameplay is nice and fun. Now, on to that final plot twist. Okay, I definitely can believe that this was a passion project. Whoever here definitely was a fan of Chopin, but I honestly have to wonder if the person who loved Chopin was actually the writer. Because it feels like the writer had something of a different idea. Like, the writer couldn't have cared less about Chopin in the overall narrative of this because, hey, instead of this being a world centered around Chopin, it's just that Chopin happens to be some special snowflake that, by entering into this world, which is apparently an alternate world that he somehow comes from, I don't know, dying or dreaming in his mind. It's, again, not stated clearly enough. Somehow he is able to prevent this usual cycle of a girl oh god, I completely forgot to talk about Polka. Basically, she's a younger Aerith. The one party member who's destined to die is the flower seller girl, blah, blah, blah. And you know,
Jova, it's probably a bad thing that you forgot to talk about Polka. That's probably a bad thing.
Yeah, that's the thing. She's like the other biggest protagonist, except...
Exactly.
It feels like the story does even less of her. Like, yeah, we're told she's meant to die, but honestly, think about it. Aside from her sickness and her magic, and that weird love relationship between her and Allegretto, what does the story really do for her?
Nothing, really.
I mean, and you
The
know...
idea is that she wants to try to do something important with her life before she dies due to her illness.
It is kind of worrying that the thing she considers most important is dying, and maybe that's meant to reflect on the story, but the execution leaves a bit to be desired, which is a shame because I don't want to dislike Polka. Like, Polka... Okay, Polka, when we first meet her, she seems like a nice enough girl, but the problem is that the plot feels like it only focuses on her when we want some big, dramatic, and sad moment. And yeah, that's another thing. Going back to why I wish the postcards we could have seen more of, this game feels like it's a bit too depressing. Now, granted, I get that it's about Chopin dying in his bed, but, like, let me put it like this. It feels like this world is really too depressing, and I get it. It's a world that people are doomed to repeat, which again comes out of nowhere, but I digress. But again, they don't know that.
Let's try and wrap this up. Come on,
They don't know.
For too long.
Let me finish. Again, it feels like it's way too down on itself, and I wish we could have had more legit fun moments. Yes, there are quote-unquote funny moments, but they don't feel the most well executed. That said, I will say there are still scenes and lines that do actually put a smile on my face, which shows that there was some effort to be had here, just not everywhere where it counted. Which brings me to the final plot twist. It was a mess. Like, if you want to do something that complicated, have it in a way that it doesn't need an entire long cutscene like that just to explain. Or if you do have to explain it right now, piece it together well. It sadly doesn't. But hey, what can we say? I will say this right
If
now.
I may, this is the kind of thing that we should have been able to piece together throughout this game, but because not a lot happened in the middle of it, we needed that bit at the end to actually make peace of everything.
Yeah, I'll say this. As much as I hate the crossovers ending, well, actually, no. Yeah, as much as I hate the crossovers ending, at the very least, we did get stuff built up to it. Granted, that doesn't change the fact that the contradictions still piss me off more in that game than they do here. Because this game
was
technically...
that we actually cared about the characters involved. That's the big difference.
Well,
And there's the advantage of the fact that we have characters that we know previously and that were touched by that.
And the gameplay was able to weave in well with the story, and that game had better writing, you know.
Point being, at least it tries to explain.
There was some compensation for, that.
Yeah, the thing is, like, with this one plot twist, not only is it incredibly complicated, but it also takes away from a lot of it, because by not having this be a dream, then that means that none of these people were really figments, which means that Frederick could have pretty much have just decided to screw off, and pretty much there would have been no consequences every now and then. Well, yeah, no consequences every now and then, which makes it feels like he didn't need to see any of them whatsoever. Like, at least if this were in his dream, it would make sense that they accompany him, because they are, in ways, him. But here, he just does whatever, and that somehow solves stuff. It's kind of a shame, because it feels like the plot had something going, but just gave up at the last meter mark. Kind of ironic, considering how I've been saying there's been a lot of problems, but again, that one plot twist is my biggest problem with this entire game. Which is a shame, because I would definitely consider this a game worth playing at least once. There's enough interesting stuff here and there, and I would like to see some stuff replicated. And it's kind of a shame, but I'll say this right now, if someone else does come up with an idea for a game centered around Frederick Chopin, do the man credit and definitely do it, but do it right. Because if I recall correctly, this game didn't do so hot, did it?
Not much, but it had positive critical praise for all that it's worth.
I
But
can
to be
see
fair,
why.
it's like mid-2000 gaming journalism, so there was still some
Remember, Java,
dignity.
but this game came out in 2008.
It didn't have the best of competition, admittedly.
Exactly.
And I will
back
give it
then,
like this,
JRPGs were going through kind of a dark age of sorts.
And I
so
will
at the
give-
time, any JRPG that was better than Final Fantasy 13 was considered a godsend, kind of.
And like
I will say this, Java, before closing off. I will still wish to see this franchise represented in a potential future Project Crosszone game.
Oh,
because
yes, absolutely.
It's technically still an Namco Bandai IP, so I want to see this kind of thing interacting with other IPs.
It's like I said before, this game is definitely very well unique, and there are definitely a lot of good things to it. I would definitely consider this a game meant to be preserved rather than one just to be trashed, because, if you can get enough enjoyment out of it, then by all means enjoy it. I will say this, objectively, it's a mess, but that doesn't mean it's all bad. There are a lot of interesting character designs every now and then. Heck, a character I could craft stuff out of. So, but yes, there you go, guys. A game that is fun to play, but oh god, it's got a mess.
Yeah.
That's all.
Alright. So sorry for this kind of downer ending, but audience, take that for your own opinion as usual for this game, and if you like it or not, decide what you do with it if hunting down, because it's not even that rare anyway. Anyway, as for us, we will see you, well, when it comes to this category, to a Tales of game, I guess. See ya.
See ya.
See ya.